Hello, this is Christian Okoye, former Kansas City Chiefs. You are listening to Grueling Truth.
Welcome to the Grueling Truth's Top 10 Running Backs in NFL History, brought to you by Gridiron Mo. Gridiron Mo is an interactive football app where you get to call what you think the offense or defense should do during a live NFL game and see what all other fans have called also. Check out Gridiron Mo at www.gridironmo.com. I'm your host, Mike Goodpasser, and I want to welcome in my co-host, Matt Andrews-Scavage.
Thanks, Mike, for having me. Good subject today. Looking forward to the list, and I'm sure there'll be lots of spirited debate.
Well, what's your criteria?
Well, it's kind of a mismatch of things. I don't want to go just by total yardage because I don't think that takes into account the whole picture. But I think you got to have at least 10,000 or right around 10,000 yards. You got to be kind of near everybody in total yardage. I think individual accolades like leading the league in rushing or being a Super Bowl MVP or a league MVP is very helpful. Consistency. And then I think that we talked about this before. It's kind of one of those things where who do you like in a big situation? And so that was definitely weighed in a lot.
How
about yours?
I don't have any criteria. It's like always. I just
None.
Board, throw the 10 out there, and we'll go with it.
Nice that you give it not much thought.
Yeah, mine is basically who I would want in a big game, in a big situation. That's what my top 10 are. You want to start us off with your number 10?
Sure. My number 10 is Tony Dorsett. Career yardage of 12,739. Played from 1977 to 88. Came right in with Dallas. They had been running with Robert Newhouse for a number of years, done very well. But once Dorsett got there, he was the Rookie of the Year. He hit over 1,000 yards in a 14-game season. He doesn't have a lot of accolades, but he was very steady. And when he was there, especially in the early part of his career, Dallas was as dominant of a team as anybody. They were right there with Pittsburgh. They were just a real good team, and Dorsett was at the heart of it, especially after Roger Staubach retired.
Yeah, when I originally did my list, I had him at like number 8, and then when I started looking at it, comparing him to some other ones, there was a couple guys I put him in. So he would probably be my number 11. I think people forget that, 8 of his first 9 seasons, he topped 1,000 yards, and the only reason it wasn't the first 9 is, if you remember, 1977. He didn't become he wasn't named the starting running back for the Cowboys until after his 10th game. And then it would have been 10 in a row, but he ran for 745 yards in 9 games during the strike-shortened 1987 or 82 season. In the postseason, he ran for 1,383 yards, which translated in almost 5 yards per carry over 17 NFL playoff games. Super Bowl 12, 66 carries, 66 yards, 15 carries, helped the Cowboys defeat the Broncos. So I can definitely see why you got him there, because he just barely missed on mine.
Yeah, my number 11 was maybe he was your number 10, but my number 11 was very, very, very close. I just like Dorsett just a little bit more.
All right, my number 10 is a guy that people forget about, Curtis Martin.
That's my 11.
14,101 yards. You can't ignore that. 5-time Pro Bowler. I think he was the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year in 1995, 2-time AFC rushing leader, led the entire NFL in rushing yards in 2004 with 1,697 yards. He was also the oldest player at the time to win a rushing title when he was 31 years old. Had to retire shortly after that with an injury, was elected into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2012. New York Jets all-time leading in rusher yards and rushing touchdowns. So my number 10 is Curtis Martin.
I had a question, though, for you. You said he led the league in rushing in 2004. That sounds a lot like Corey Dillon's numbers. Are you sure that's right?
He had 1,697. That's what it said when I looked at the NFL stat thing.
I had forgotten, because I know Corey Dillon for the Patriots have over 1,600 yards rushing or 1,400 yards rushing? I thought it was 16.
Hold on, we'll look it up real quick. That's what the Internet's for.
But yeah, Curtis Martin, boy, you talk about a steady, consistent guy that, like you said, most people have really forgotten about, because he wasn't real flashy, and he wasn't like a Super Bowl MVP or anything like that. But he's he's right there. I mean, I like Tony Dorsett a little bit more. Just maybe it's his style of running. Just I don't know. He kind of was like the Emmitt Smith from 77 to 80, maybe 82 before Emmitt Smith. He just seemed like that dominant playoff running back. But certainly Curtis Martin's deserving as well.
All right, Corey Dillon was second with 1,635 yards.
Okay. It's like,
and Curtis Martin was 1,697 yards. Hell, has there ever been a year where you had? Have you ever had a year? Was there ever a year where two guys ran for over 1,600 yards?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, that'll have to be a question for the next show.
So he was on the Jets, and that would have been, his 10th year in the league.
Yeah, because I think 2006 was his last year because he got injured.
Yeah, that's impressive.
It was either 2005 or 2006. All right, my number 9. He's a guy that didn't play as long as the other ones, but still didn't miss by much. And rushing yards, that would be Earl Campbell, 9,407 yards, 4.3 a carry, 74 touchdowns. I mean, this guy was basically the Houston Oilers offense. I mean, he took them to the playoffs in 78, 79, and 80. Offensive Rookie of the Year in 78. NFL MVP by the Pro Football Writers in 78. Then again, NFL MVP, 79, NFL MVP in 80. I know these are different awards. One was AP, one was Pro Football Writers. But I mean, for 3 years in a row, there was no doubt he was as good as anybody that ever lived. Heck, the Tennessee Titans even retired his number, and when they weren't even in that city at the time, and I'll tell you how good he was.
No question.
Heisman Trophy winner. His college stats are unreal, but a 5-time Pro Bowler, 78 through 81, and then again in 1983. Went with Bum Phillips to the Saints. Actually had them on the brink of making the playoffs, but not my number 9 was Earl Campbell.
Yeah, I got Earl Campbell just slightly higher. I love Earl Campbell. I'll talk about him after my number 9.
I love him too. Does your wife know you love him?
Does yours?
Yeah, she knows. She's good with it.
She knows. I haven't confessed.
Well, I've been married 20 years, which is like twice as long as you. So
I've been married 15, my friend.
Oh, well, see, I'm from Indiana. So if you've been married 15 years and I've been married 20 years, that means I've been married twice as long as you. All right,
okay.
What's your number 9?
I like the math. My number 9 is Franco Harris. 12,120 yards from 1972 to 84. Super Bowl 9 MVP. I like Franco Harris a lot. I think the Steelers really didn't. They probably would not have won, been as nearly as good as they were without Franco Harris. The guy was as consistent as anybody in the 1970s. Big running back, very hard to bring down. Never led the league in rushing. And maybe that's where I penalized him a little bit. Very consistent. But I like Earl Campbell a little bit more on the dominance factor. But Franco Harris is fantastic as well. But I got him just slightly lower than Earl Campbell.
Yeah, I had him just out of my top 10. And no, it's not just because he's a Pittsburgh Steeler. But great running back. I think people forget how great he was. Obviously, when I did this list, I probably did. But, I mean, he kind of got lost in the shuffle of that offense, too. You had Swan, Stallworth, Bradshaw, even Rocky Bleier, the offensive line, steroid-ridden. But what's your number 8?
My number 8 is Earl Campbell. Like you said, they were different awards, but 3 times I think he got the Pro Football Writers MVP. He was AP MVP in 1979. He's a 3-time Offensive Player of the Year. His first 4 years were just as dominant as anybody's. 1,900 yards in 1980. It comes right out of the gates with, I think, 1,700 or 1,600 yards. Repeats it again in 79. 19, I think he had like 19 touchdowns in 79.
Yeah.
Just, like you said, he was pretty much the offense. They didn't have a great passing game. They didn't, they had a good defense. But, everything just kind of went through Earl Campbell, and everyone knew it was coming. And he was getting the ball almost 400 times a season. And he was like the first running back to really do that.
Well, and I think they had a great defense and a great running game. They were just missing a passing game. The defense, you had guys like Robert Brazile, Curly Culp. I mean, they were pretty loaded there, too. But, yeah, I mean, 77, 76, they were good teams with Bum Phillips, but he's the one that really put them over the top. My number 8 is the Kansas Comet, Gale Sayers. I mean, probably him and Barry Sanders had the most electric running styles of anybody you'll ever see. I mean, the way they could shift, feint, unparalleled acceleration, both of them. The Bears drafted Sayers as the 4th overall pick out of Kansas, where you get the Kansas Comet name. Sayers immediately took the league by storm, ran for a record 22 touchdowns, over 2,200 all-purpose yards. And I think the game that really sets him apart from almost anybody else was the 6-touchdown effort he had in a 61-20 win over the hated San Francisco 49ers.
You're
the greatest individual effort in the history of the game for a running back. 6 foot, 200-pound, led the NFL in rushing at 66 and 69 with 1,200 and then a little over 1,000, and that was in 14-game seasons when it can matter. He averaged in his first 4 seasons 5.2 a carry, 5.4, 4.7, and 6.2. He was a great runner, always a threat to score on handoffs. He could catch the ball out of the backfield as good as anybody. And even as a return man in the kicking game, which I know tomorrow we're going to have our top 10 returners in NFL history, and he'll probably make the list there also. So my number 8 is Gale Sayers.
Gale Sayers is really, really good. I mean, he was like the offense for them when he got there in 65.
Now, is he in your list, or did you just leave him off?
Well, I didn't just leave him off. He was in the running back list of guys I was considering. I did have him just outside my top 10 list just because of longevity. There's another guy that I would have liked to put in as well, but longevity I think had to play into it just a little bit. But if he had played longer, he could have easily hit 10,000, 11,000 yards, no problem.
Yeah, see mine. He's probably top 5 if he plays longer. I put him in because the 2 guys that really got me were him and Terrell Davis. But I thought the real difference was that Sayers did it for 5 or 6 years, where Davis was 3, 4 years. Yeah,
but Davis and this is where I wanted to put Gale Sayers in, but then I feel like I had to put Terrell Davis in and have him higher because he had the 2,000-yard season. He was league MVP in '98, and Super Bowl MVP in '90. Those 3 years. And then he was Offensive Rookie of the Year as well. Those 4 years, I think, were more dominant than Gale Sayers' years.
Well, I'll give you this. Gale Sayers played on a team that was nowhere near the Denver Broncos' offensive line, and he averaged over 5 yards a carry each of his first 4 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good argument to be made.
Well,
my number...
and we'll admit that I'm right, so go ahead.
Okay. My number 7 running back is Emmitt Smith. 18,355 yards, the league's all-time leading rusher. Played from 1990 to 04. He's a 4-time rushing champ, 164 rushing touchdowns, total of 175. I think he's like 3rd behind Rice. Super Bowl 28 MVP, 1993 league MVP. I think he's still the all-time playoff leading rusher with like 1,600 yards or something like that. The guy was he was the biggest big game running back probably in the history of the league. When you put him in a playoff game, what he was able to accomplish. Now, there's always going to be the detractors that'll penalize him for having one of the best offensive lines in NFL history. So there's something to that. I have him lower on my list because I just think the guys ahead of him were better, but I can't leave Emmitt Smith off the list because of what he accomplished. And I don't know that there was anybody that had a better nose for the end zone than Emmitt Smith as a running back. So you look at his accolades, or you look at his accomplishments, and the fact that he was able to play for as long as he did and put up that kind of yardage, I can't leave him off my top 10, that's for sure.
So Emmitt Smith's your number 8 or 7?
He's my 6th.
He's your 6th?
I'm sorry, 7.
Okay.
7.
So you're as confused as I am. All right, my number 7 is LaDainian Tomlinson. I won't call him LT because that's Lawrence Taylor.
Right.
Probably the most complete back of his era, 5'10", 221 pounds. He had everything. He ran for speed, power. He could run inside of tackles, outside of the tackles. Was a huge threat to catch the ball out in open space. He also threw 7 touchdown passes and had a 154.4 passer rating over his 8-year career, which makes him highly qualified to come back and beat a 49ers quarterback.
Or the Bengals. Maybe he can win you a playoff game.
The Bengals had a well, he was hurt, or they would have. Tomlinson ranks right now as the fifth in yards from scrimmage in the NFL's history with 18,456. Rushed for over 1,000 yards of each of his first 8 seasons, 2 rushing titles, as well as 2003 when he racked up 2,370 yards for scrimmage. Also won the Walter Payton Man of the Year award in 2006. Was very similar. The guy I can really compare him to, a guy that just barely missed my list, was Thurman Thomas. But I think Tomlinson, and similar to Thurman Thomas, I think his legacy will be forever marred by his inability to win the big one. But I think it's really hard to put that on a running back. Never made it to the Super Bowl, even though he was surrounded by Pro Bowl talent. But that's something him and Marty Schottenheimer are probably going to take to the grave with him. But my number 7 is LaDainian Tomlinson.
Yeah, I like LaDainian Tomlinson a lot, too. He barely missed my top 10, but I thought of him also with Thurman Thomas. Thurman Thomas may have been my most favorite running back that didn't make my list. The hybrid type running back that's such a threat out of the backfield. LaDainian Tomlinson was just like that, and like you said, he's the guy that broke Paul Hornung's scoring record, and he was also throwing passes. A little bit, I think his dominance was just for a couple of years, or just a handful of years, but he was very consistent for a long time. I think in his MVP season, or maybe that was 2003, where he caught 100 balls.
Yeah.
You don't see that very much out of a starting tailback, but I can definitely understand why he's in there.
All right.
My number 6 is Marshall Faulk, 12,279 career yards, played from 94 to 04. He was, coming out of college, I think there were games where he was rushing for 400 or 500 yards a game. He was quite the sought-after draft pick. Did not disappoint right away in his rookie year. Started to, critics were definitely giving him a hard time. He was, from 95 to 98, he was not quite the running back that he was in his rookie year. But then that trade came where he gets moved to St. Louis. And you look up his numbers from 1999 to 01. I mean, he's over 1,300 yards every year. He's well over 5 yards a carry every year. He's catching 80-some passes a year. He's only the second guy, besides Roger Craig, to do the 1,000. His yards after scrimmage are ridiculous. League MVP in 2000, and could have been league MVP in 99 or 01, but it was him or Kurt Warner. It was just whoever you liked more. I mean, he was just as deserving as Kurt Warner. Could have won it all 3 years. Just his speed, his ability at receiver. Guy could even block. So one of the most complete running backs I've ever watched. I couldn't justify anybody that I had lower to go in his number 6 spot. So my number 6, Marshall Faulk.
All right. My number 6 is Emmitt Smith, the guy you just talked about. And I don't hold the offensive line against him either. It's just the thing to me is the game that stood out to me. You already talked about his career, but the game that stood out to me was that 1993 last game of the season against the Cowboys with the separated shoulder, where he went for well over 100 yards, 175 career touchdowns. He has to make anybody's list, I think. So my number 6 is Emmitt Smith, which brings me to – yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to add a little bit to what you were saying about that 93 season. What a lot of people forget is after the 92 season and his Super Bowl, or when they won the Super Bowl, he held out and missed the first 2 games of the season.
Yeah,
the Dallas started 0-2, and he still had probably his most dominant year with almost 1,400 yards rushing that year.
All righty, we'll go to number 5, which I wanted to put this guy higher because he was my favorite running back when I was little. But that was Eric Dickerson, who wore every piece of equipment known to man. I even think he had swimmer goggles on, didn't he? I think he was arguably the best pure straight runner in NFL history, 6'3", 220 pounds. He was noticeably taller than a conventional running back then, and really bigger than most of them now. And he was always just a few gallops away from top speed. took the NFL by storm out of SMU. 1983 put together the greatest rookie season up to that point, 1,808 yards. Ran for 2,105 in 1984. After 7 straight seasons, Dickerson was emerged as the fastest player ever to cross over 10,000 yards. Still lays claim to 3 of the top 20 single rushing yardage performances in NFL history. When he retired, Dickerson left the game of football as the second leading rusher of all time. And, I mean, if you want to see his impact, 1987, a few games in, around the strike season, he gets traded to the Colts. The Rams all of a sudden don't make the playoffs, and the Colts are a playoff team. So Eric Dickerson's my number 5 or 6.
He is my number 5 as well. Okay. He's your 5. He's also my 5.
Yeah.
Those first 7 seasons are crazy. They didn't have a great passing attack. Everyone knew the ball was probably going to Dickerson, and like you said, probably the best in the history of the game. If you're just talking straight ahead runner with speed, his strides were crazy. He didn't even look like he was running that fast. He could pretty much do it all. They didn't throw a lot to him. They just didn't throw a lot in general. But when they threw his way, he pulled down receptions. And he had some of the best playoff games. I mean, he had the 240-yard performance against, I believe that was Dallas in 85.
248.
He had another, 248. He had another near 200-yard performance, I believe, in 83 or 84. And, or maybe that was 86. I can't remember. I didn't write that one down. But, he had, like you said, the 1,800-yard season for rookie season. He had the 2,105, and then, in 86, I think he comes back with another 1,800-yard season. And you just didn't really see that at that time. But his first 7 seasons, he's pretty much as good as anybody that I've ever watched. So,
and the thing about him, I think the thing that keeps him at 5 instead of 4 or around that area that keeps him from moving up is just the playoff performances with the fumbles. I mean, you had the 85 championship game. He had a couple fumbles there. You had the 86 playoff game in Washington where I think he fumbled 2 or 3 times in a fairly close game that could have cost him that game.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's probably the difference.
All righty. So we're up to your number 4, correct?
Yep. My number 4 is O.J. Simpson. Forgetting all about what we know of O.J. today, just looking strictly at O.J. the player. 11,236 yards. You look at his first few years in the league; those teams were terrible. He still had respectable stats, nothing really spectacular until 1972. But 1973 is still probably the greatest season ever. Over 2,000 yards in a 14-game season. I don't think we'll ever see that again. I mean, averaging 6 yards a carry, and the thing is, look at the weather he ran in. He's in Buffalo. Marshall Faulk's running in turf. A lot of these guys are running in good weather. He's doing this in Buffalo in the snow, in the rain, in the bad weather, and he is the offense for a lot of his career. And they don't have a lot of passing game or anything. Everyone knows it's going to O.J. Simpson, and he's still running through. I think he was. I don't know that he was as tall as Eric Dickerson, but he was a big back for his day. And you look at his stride and his speed. OJ's got to be in every top 5 list. I mean, if you don't put OJ in your top 5, I think there's something wrong.
All right, I agree, and I'll tell you, he is the closest thing. I mean, him and Eric Dickerson, I think, were very similar, where they would just run down a sideline, and there's DBs just keep falling farther and farther behind, where it doesn't usually happen. First 3 years, it took him till his 4th year to get 1,000 yards. I mean, the Bills were terrible. I think Lou Saban tried him at wide receiver at one point either. But his 4th season, he claimed the NFL rushing title. Of course, he's my number 4, too, which is why I'm going to continue to talk here. Where he had 1,251 rushing yards in 14 games. And like you said, 1973, you talked about bad weather. He got to that game needing 197 yards. They played in a snowstorm at Shea Stadium, and he goes over 200 yards in that game and leaves the game with 3 minutes left in the game.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he averaged 6 yards per carry and 143 rushing yards a game. Those totals would project out to almost 2,300 yards during the course of a 16-game season today. So
exactly.
Other than the fact he killed his wife, he's number 4 on my list. So
nice way to throw that one in there.
Yeah, at least I didn't say he was a real killer when he played. My number 3. I hated to put this guy this low because he was my favorite, and that's Walter Payton, who ran between the tackles, outside on pitches, sweeps, blocked effectively, was even a threat to pass. Finished his playing career with 16,726 rushing yards, breaking Jim Brown's record by 4,000 yards, 110 touchdowns, one MVP award, won the 1985 Super Bowl, even though he got screwed over where he didn't get the handoff for the touchdown. They gave it to the fat guy.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing about him running back-wise is over a 13-year career, he missed one game in 13 years. He wasn't a speed demon. He racked up yardage through sheer tenacity and had all kind of moves, kind of like Barry Sanders, but not quite as quick because he was more apt. Also, Peyton, you'd see him be in the open field and then line up and cut back across the field just to punish a tackler. As good with the stiff arm and explosive spin moves as anybody you've ever seen. And he would not run out of bounds, unlike Franco Harris. So my number 3 was Walter Payton.
Yeah, Walter's probably my favorite running back. Him and the guy I would love to put on this list, Bo Jackson, but I can't justify it. So
well, you could.
My number.
It would just be wrong.
Yeah, that would be tough. My number 3 is Barry Sanders. Retired with 15,269 yards played from 89 to 98. He only missed 6 games. He had no line for probably almost half of his career. It got a little bit better with Lomas Brown and Kevin Glover, but he did not have a dominant line at all. He had the 2,000-yard season where he was co-MVP. I think he should have just got MVP by himself, but that's me. But you watch Barry, and he would be. You could stop him for a little while. You look at a lot of his runs, and he'd go like 2 yards, 1 yard, maybe -2, -1, 0, and then he'd break one for 80. He was a threat to score every time he touched the ball. Unfortunately, Wayne Fontes would take him out of the game once they reached the red zone, especially inside the 10. So I think that definitely harmed his rushing totals. But you look at him when he came in the league in '89. I think he led the league right away, and he had 1,300 yards every season except 1993, where he missed like 5 or 6 games. And he only missed 6 games in his career. Probably the most exciting running back I've ever seen. Him and Gale Sayers, like you said before. Man, it's hard. This is where it gets really tough because each of the top 3 running backs you could make a case for all 3 of them, really. But I had to go with the other 2 ahead of them just slightly, but not by much. Barry's my number 3.
All right. So what's your number 2?
Walter. Walter Payton, to me, is the most complete running back in the history of the NFL. The guy could block, one of the best blocking running backs I've ever seen. Especially you watch the game that really turned the '85 Bears around was the Week 3 against the Vikings. They were not looking good. McMahon was on the bench. McMahon comes in, throws that touchdown to Willie Gault, but most people forget that there was a blitzer coming straight up the middle that would have buried McMahon, and it was Walter that just came in and just buried the guy. So, you look at his blocking ability. He was the leading receiver on the Bears a couple of years, especially in the '85 season. And for most of his career, he had nothing to play behind. And he was doing everything almost by himself. Like you said, he never ran out of bounds. He was always looking for contact. 16,000 yards. Most complete running back I've ever watched.
Well, my number 2 is Barry Sanders, who you had at number 3, I believe. It was hard for me to put him over Walter Payton, but just from watching him, the dude was unreal. He had, 97, where he averaged 6.1 yards per carry. And,
yep.
He was even so, and of course, he retired after the 98 season, so he was in his prime. He might have went for 25,000 yards by the time he was done. And in terms of all-time yardage, he rushed for 1,000 yards every year with a 5-yard per carry average. I mean, he ended up 15,269 yards, which was second at the time to Walter Payton. And the thing is, Walter Payton three more years and barely had 1,000 more rushing yards than him.
Yeah.
You know? And Emmitt Smith went on to break the NFL 18,000. So, I mean, I don't think that it is beyond comprehension that if he wanted to play longer or wouldn't have been stuck in Detroit with Wayne Fonts and all those morons, that he might have had 20,000 yards by the time he was done. And
he definitely would have broke the record before Emmitt.
Yeah, he definitely would have, because hell, the next year he would have broke it probably. That was what was so amazing about him not playing another year. And, I mean, I think his biggest saving grace in all this is he never went to a Super Bowl, but by God, the Detroit Lions won playoff game when he was there.
Yeah, they went to the championship game in '91.
Yeah, they got their doors blown off, but they beat the Cowboys in the playoffs. And, I mean, still, Barry Sanders helped get them there. So I assume our number one is the same, or one of us is smoking crack. So
yeah, if our number one is not the same, then we got a problem.
Yeah, my number one, of course, I'll say it at the same time, was Boobie Clark. Boobie was Bengal.
I thought you were going to say Ickey Woods.
No, it's Boobie Clark, because I remember when I was little going to the Bengals games with my dad, that every time Boobie Clark would carry the ball, everybody would start chanting, Boobie. And I was like 4 or 5 years old, so I thought that was the coolest damn thing ever.
Yeah.
But no, I believe both our number ones is a 6'2", 230-pound running back from the Cleveland Browns by the name of Jim Brown.
No
who,
doubt.
At that size, would still be an enormous running back today.
Oh, yeah, and his speed, everything.
Yeah, bigger, faster, stronger, better than the competition, a man amongst boys. My favorite thing is how they'd tackle him, and then it'd take him like 27 seconds to get up. You talk about, I mean, forearm shivers to overpower lightweight cornerbacks. I mean, from there it was off to the races with him. 12,312 yards, 106 touchdowns, 8 rushing titles in 9 years. I don't think anybody will ever do that again. Now if a guy wins 3 or 4 in his career, he goes to the Hall of Fame. And he was 29 when he retired. But I don't think there's any doubt number one is Jim Brown.
Yeah, it has to be. You know, I like Walter Payton. I like Barry Sanders. I like Jim Brown a lot too, but I just don't think you can ignore what he accomplished. It doesn't matter what year it was. You know, back then the game favored defenses. So he's getting the ball. He's probably, if they're running 4 downs, he's running at least 3 of them. You know, every play. He's getting the ball. Everyone knows it's coming. They can have a great passing attack. Later on, it got a little bit better. But the amount of carries he's getting where the defense knows it's coming, and he's still averaging well over 5 yards. I think he averaged like 6'3" or 6'4" in the '63 season, which might be the most dominant season in the history of the, well, almost right behind OJ. But I mean, he's as dominant as anybody, and I think he translates very well into the game today. Still really good size, really good combination of power and speed. You know, he could catch when he had to. I'm sure they could teach him to block, you know, if they really wanted him to. But
well, I'm sure he could have blocked if he'd have really wanted to.
Yeah.
I don't think they would have had to teach him. I think they would have just had to talk him into it.
Yeah. But, you know, he's got to be he has to be number one just because he retires in his prime. He retires as MVP of the league in '65. And, you know, who's to say how much longer he could have played or where, you know, what else he could have accomplished.
Now, I will tell you this. There were guys that had more dominating seasons because Marion Motley ran for 8.2 yards a carry one season, but that was the AFC. For his career, Marion Motley averaged 5.7 yards per carry, too. That's on 828 carries. He just missed my list because he didn't play that long because of injuries. And that brings me to our website. If people want to go check it out, we actually got it active now, thegrillingtruth.net. And Matt, at some point, is going to put up an article on there, but I already got some of mine up there.
Week.
So, I mean, Matt's always got an excuse. He's on vacation this week, but he still doesn't have time. It takes like 3 minutes, and I figured out how to do it, so I'm computer illiterate as hell, so he should be able to. But you can check out all of our old shows on there. You can go in. You can even see a picture of Matt Andrew Scavage, which
I saw that. Which thanks for asking me which picture I thought should be on there.
I didn't put the picture up. That was John Jackson, the webmaster. So you're going to have to talk to John about that because it did look a little geeky.
Sure, I can
but I figured you were probably in line at a Star Wars convention or a Star Wars movie. So.
No, I was actually at Candlestick Park.
Candlestick
Park.
I
was doing a stadium tour.
I figured it would be.
And I was in the locker room, right by Joe Montana's locker. So, yeah, I'm in my Niner gear, and it was a pretty cool day.
I always thought it was sad to see a grown man in a football jersey that didn't have his own name on the back of it, but that's all right.
Okay.
But make sure you check that out. And the rest of the week, tomorrow, Matt will be back with me, and we're going to do the top 10 return men in NFL history. And then tomorrow night, we will have Joe Rodriguez come in with me and Matt. Did I say that right? That was like really bad grammar, wasn't it?
It's not a big deal, Mike. However you want to do it. It's kind of like when your kids learn to talk. You don't correct them every time. You just let them go. They'll get it eventually.
Yeah, what the hell? But it'll be myself, Matt, and Joe Rodriguez, he's from New York, so we got to have people from New York from time to time, just because they talk funny and it makes us sound better. But we will have
what would be a show without a little East Coast bias, right?
Yeah, we'll have a top 10 quarterbacks in NFL history. And then Friday, during the afternoon, we'll have the Northern Kentucky Nightmare Show previewing a game against Western Michigan. Also Friday night, myself, I will welcome in Dr. Bill Grum for a holistic medicine hour again, natural medicine. Make sure you check that out. Next week, we just got Jonathan Lieber, who was a pitcher for the Cubs. Yankees, won 140 games over his major league career. He will be with us next Wednesday night. So, Matt, do you have any final words?
Well, as always, these top 10 lists they're not easy to compile. It's hard to sometimes, especially when you get up there, to pick one over the other. But I think we usually, I think most people, if they listen, if they have any idea who some of these players were, they'll agree that we got it basically right.
Yeah, I left off Marshall Faulk, but that's just because I wanted to get Gale Sayers and Curtis Martin on in case you didn't. So anybody out there
that's all right.
saying, that idiot didn't pick Marshall Faulk. Well,
I don't know how you keep Marshall Faulk out of the top 10.
I just wanted to make sure Gale Sayers, Earl Campbell, and Curtis Martin got on there. Because I knew that you wouldn't, because you were just mean, except for the Earl Campbell one. It's hard to ignore Curtis Martin. He had 14,000 yards.
It is hard to ignore, but I had to.
Yeah, well, you're just a hard ass. See, I'm a more loving and
I like
caring
Marshall
individual.
Faulk a little bit more.
So I put
Marshall Faulk over Curtis Martin. You got to put Marshall Faulk over Curtis Martin.
I don't have to do a damn thing, Matt. But
I
do have to tell everybody to check out our sponsors, Gridiron Mo, SteelbergBox.com, and FootballVideos.com. So make sure you go check out all those websites. So make sure you join myself and Matt, or Matt and I, however you would like me to say it, Matt, tomorrow for the top 10 return men. Make sure you follow us on Twitter @TheGruelingTruth, and check out @TheGruelingTruth, or what was it, www.gruelingtruth.net for our website. Check us out Spreaker, iTunes, and Stitcher. So for Matt Andrew Scavage, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.